I keep doing it.
Changed the name about a year ago.
Change the name. Can't change the muscle memory. The Gooners podcast. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. You've been relaxing during your interlull?
As much as you can with, the 2-year-old, but yeah, we
a 2-year-old model, by the way. I
yeah,
see pictures of you making their way online about doing modeling shoots. What's going on with that?
We did some family portraits, and I think in the disclaimer it says like she can use those for marketing, and then all of a sudden my mom like pings us in a text being like, do you know that this was used? And we're both like, yeah, we don't care. But yeah, and then
your modeling pictures, the pictures looked okay, but I decided to surprise you today because you need a little bit more professional of a photographer. So today we have, because of those modeling pictures, and only because of that, we've decided to have on a guest who knows a thing or two about photography. Yeah. So today with us, we have, although he can't be seen, we have with us the legend behind the lens, the prince of the photograph, also known as the Duke of the Darkroom, the Prime Minister of the Panorama, the Ansel Adams of Arsenal. Welcome, and now we're going to let him talk. Welcome to the Gooners podcast, Stuart MacFarlane. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. The Ansel Adams, love it. One of my favorite photographers when I was studying. But thanks for the introduction.
You could hear me feverishly Googling famous photographers.
Oh, right.
Your name was the first one that came up, but Ansel Adams was the second one.
Yeah, but I'm not in his class, I'm afraid.
Well, thanks for joining us, Stuart. We couldn't get Ansel on the podcast, so we're thrilled to have you. If for some reason you're listening to this and you've been living under a rock, you aren't familiar with Stuart by name, you're definitely familiar with his work. And if you're not familiar with his work, please just hit the off button on your computer right now because this podcast is not for you. If you visited the Arsenal website, you've seen a tweet or an Instagram post with a photo in it, then you've seen Stuart's handiwork. And for me, Stuart, the obvious place to start is to go back to your time at Color Sport and kind of how you transition into the eventual position as Arsenal's chief photographer, the greatest team by far the world has ever seen.
All right. Well, I started at Color Sport in 1988, and about 2 years later, Color Sport are based in Islington, not far from Highbury. Arsenal were looking for a photo agency to cover games for them, and I was one of the sort of junior photographers at the time. So, and being a fan as well, I volunteered for as many games as possible. And sort of as sort of years went by, I covered more. I was at the training ground, I was covering home and away matches, and then it came to 2000 and sort of late 2000, and they were looking for a staff guy to come in and sort of record the building of the new stadium and build an archive. So, and they asked me, and I sort of jumped at the chance. Really,
what a fantastic time in Arsenal's history to be involved in that. I mean, right in the glory years of Arsene Wenger's Arsenal. Pre-invincible, post-double years.
Yeah,
it's got to be a thrill.
Yeah, it was great. But when I first started working, my first job for Arsenal was in 1990, and doing stuff with George Graham and people like Tony Adams, David Rocastle, Mickey Thomas. Obviously, football was very different then, but great people to work with. And from working with George to Bruce Rioch, and then obviously Arsene has been incredible for 22 years, and now with Unai as well, who's great to work with. So it's been a decent sort of 29 years. But
I bet it has. Andy.
Yeah. So with it being an international break, do you get a few days rest, or do you have team obligations that will fill up these couple of weeks where most guys are off international duty?
Generally. I've just had a small child, so I'm trying to sort of take as much time off as possible. But breaks, I was away for a week. On the Monday after the Tottenham game, I had a week on the sort of south coast of England. I try and have a bit of a break from work, but there's always stuff going on. But there's two of us, myself and David Price, who's the other photographer who I know you've both met. If one of us is away, the other one covers. So there's always stuff going on. So he was quite busy when I was away. But generally, there's not really much downtime now anymore.
Sure, absolutely.
Football's a year-round sport.
Oh, it absolutely is. How often do you get people who come up to you and try and get you to help change their careers to photography? I mean, they assume this is such an easy job. Trust me, I've seen Mike try and take photos that he shares on our WhatsApp group. I mean, it's got to be a difficult position. Where
I'm not in your league.
but how often does that happen to you, where you have supporters come up and try and badger you into, hey, let me get on that team? I mean, because it's a pretty elite status, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's one of those that I don't tend to look at a lot of my sort of messages on Instagram or Twitter, because if they're either people asking for jobs or people abusing me for being an Arsenal fan and working for Arsenal. So, but I do bump into people. I try and help when I can. It's not an easy industry to get into, and occasionally we have students come in and do a day's work with us, but it's a tough. You've got to be very lucky to get into this industry. The door just opened for me, and the hardest thing is getting your foot in the door. Once you're in, then it's all about luck, really.
It's clear from your tweets and comments that you're not only a club employee, but a true Arsenal supporter, whether you're trolling Spurs, backing our players on social media, even trolling some of the individuals. I think you famously, with the Arsenal horse a couple transfer windows ago, you don't hesitate to show your true colors, which I think is outstanding. Have you always been a Gooner? You kind of just mentioned that you grew up a supporter of football, but did Arsenal have a specific place in your heart in your childhood, or was it just, hey, I've been an employee of this club for so long, I've learned to love them?
Well, my dad was a big Chelsea fan, and when I was really young, he took me there. But it was one of those. It was in the sort of deep, really bad 70s when there's a lot of racism in football, and Chelsea was. Unfortunately, there were fans around there at the time that were, that it wasn't a great place to go. But where I used to live, my next door neighbour was a massive Arsenal fan. So from an early age, I used to sit in his, he used to wear an Arsenal kit virtually every day. But I used to sit in his room and we used to play records with all the Arsenal FA Cup finals on. So I was, my dad wanted me to be a Chelsea fan, but Arsenal was always the sort of one for me, and it was. One of the first teams I ever saw live, and the second stadium I ever went to, and it was full. Highbury was full. My dad took me to Chelsea; it was empty, and they were running battles in the street outside, and it wasn't a nice place. Yeah, it wasn't a nice place for a young kid to go and watch football. I went to Arsenal, and there was, my mother was from Ireland, and Arsenal was. Full of Irish players from the same city as my mother, so it was quite an very easy transition to, from one to the other at a very young age.
Spoiler alert: Chelsea's still not a good place for a young child to go watch a game. So, in addition to your work with Arsenal, you've also collaborated on a couple of great projects from another friend of the podcast and past and future guest, Amy Lawrence. Her book's both about the Invincibles and a 20-year of Arsenal Wenger Revolution book, which we're looking at here on the screen, if I've done things correctly. So that included you getting to sit with Arsene and reminisce about the pictures in the book, did it not?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
And if you could just kind of let us know how it all came together, what the experience was like, and one of our listeners. Our friend Fredo from New Orleans asks if there's any shots you had to leave out of the book that you wish were in there, but just kind of walk us through the process of doing a book like that, because it's pretty profound.
Well, with Amy's first book, the Invincibles book, I supplied some pictures for it, and then she just came up with the idea of doing a picture book, and I thought, great, I had the pictures, she wrote the words, and what a great person to work with. And it was fantastic to sit down. We spent quite a lot of time. We went through thousands of pictures between the two of us, and then finally getting to sit down with Arsene and go through stuff. For me, it was really rewarding because he actually appreciated my photography, whereas I've always felt that I'm sort of been in the way a little bit. There are times at training sessions where he'd tell me to put my cameras down and go and collect footballs and move goals and stuff. So And and the last sort of month of him being as Arsenal manager, I spoke to him even more and more, and we talked about photography and stuff like that. So it was a brilliant experience. But it's great to work with Amy, and I was so proud of the sort of finished book. It was really it's something that my kids love, and I hope that people will still like it in years to come.
Absolutely. And Arsene does not come across as the type of person who engages in small talk about things he doesn't care about. So if he's engaging you about photography, it's because he has a true interest and looks to you as being the expert. And that had to just be the thrill of a lifetime.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And he, he's such an intelligent guy. He was asking me about how photography's changed when you've gone from film to digital and stuff like that. Really something that just the ordinary man in the street wouldn't ask. But he was really, really sort of quizzing me about how photography's changed. So it was a great experience, and to sit down with, from all the years I've known him, to actually sit down and sort of chat. We used to just have a 2-minute conversation at the start of the season and about how our summers had gone, and then it would be a hello and a handshake every morning, but never really sat down and had a proper conversation with him. But certainly in the last couple of years before he left, we had quite a few very good ones as well.
That's fantastic. And now sometimes when talking to you, the questions kind of write themselves, and I know that there are some questions you've been asked many times before. We know that among many others, the lovely Becca, who's in the chat room today from Iowa, wants to know what your favorite picture of all time is. And I know that you've said before that you prefer to let others decide for you, but you've also commented very recently about this picture, if you can see it, Stu.
Yeah.
That that it's one that really is up there in your heart. I mean, we've got some Arsenal greats in there. Gary Lewin, Stuart Houston, Pat Rice, Geordie Armstrong, Steve Burtonshaw, now look, I had to ask some of these names. I didn't come up with all these on my own. I got about 4 out of the 7. And then Alan Miller. Did Alan Miller finish off the job there, or was this just a photo bomb?
I honestly don't think he had the guts to pour it over George's
I wouldn't have done that.
No.
That trophy would have gone into a location of an undisclosed location.
Yeah. But do you know, it's one of those pictures at the time you take it, because I can't remember how it happened, but obviously you won the league. I think George might have just said, "Can you take a quick picture?" But certainly as the years go by, you realise it has a really sort of historical value to it, and that's why I love it. And at the time, I was pretty young, and I've taken lots of pictures at the time. You think, okay, well, I've got that. I've got George with the trophy, or I've got Ian Wright or Dennis Bergkamp with the trophy, and it's only now I look back and that's a historical picture, and that picture, that group of staff. What a great group of staff and great people. It's one that gets sort of seen over and over again. And probably in the first 10 years of me taking it, never really got seen.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing things like this. The old red and yellow and blue shirts that you see them running off the bench with when they won the league at Anfield. This, I'm guessing, was a couple years later.
That was 91. That was after we won the league. That was at Highbury.
Well, fantastic stuff. And if you happen to think of any other because we had people asking us left and right, what's your favorite picture? Which it's a very interesting question, but it's one that I'm sure you've been asked plenty of times before.
Well, it's generally linked to moments in time, really, because you can take a great picture, and if we lose the game, no one cares. I mean, I remember one of my first games, getting off an aeroplane in Manchester and walk into our minibus with David Dean, and he said to me, if we lose the game today, no one's going to be interested in any of your pictures. And it sort of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. And then I thought, well, that's right. And when you lose, no one cares. No one cares about your photographs. If you win, everyone wants to see them. If you lose, it's just, you may as well throw them in the bin. But for us professionally, we have to go through the same process, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah. Well, the other thing a lot of people wanted to know, and I certainly did, is with regards to the transfer window. And I mean, but beyond the Kroenkes, Rowe, Vinay, and the scouts and financial team and negotiators, I'd imagine you're right up there when it comes to being among the first to know when a transfer is near or complete. So to the extent that you can you kind of walk us through the process from your end, the level of involvement you have when an incoming transfer, like say Pepe, for example, is coming in, and from when you learn that he's coming in all the way until we see this, which is the moment that just sends Arsenal supporters into rapture. The official announcement, and Arsenal do love an elaborate rollout, and no doubt that you play a huge role in doing that. So can you just tell us kind of what those days towards the end of the transfer window are like?
Well, it's changed quite a bit since I've been at the club. I mean, years ago when you signed a player, sometimes we didn't even do a sort of photo shoot with them. But now it's such a massive thing that there's quite a lot of people involved and who know what's going on. But to be honest, I'd rather not know, and I'd rather just get told the day before, so I don't let it slip. Not that I ever have, but my preparation is it's not that complicated. I know exactly what I'm doing. My role really is to get the sort of key shots, speak to the kit man about getting the kit sizes, make sure the player's got his boots, just simple stuff like that. Run through with the designers what sort of shots they need. But you occasionally do get the heads up a week before. But
who does the choreography?
It's not worth passing information. Or
there's a theater now to this whole thing that seems to be just really in the last couple of years to the big the big announcement. Whether it's the where's Pierre or Yo Pierre. I mean, it's now where everyone has to be different. So who. And feel free to name names if you want, otherwise don't. But who kind of is the creative mind behind the way that these players are rolled out now?
Well, we have a set for me for stills. There's a set sort of template of shots I have to get that run throughout the whole of the club through retail and commercial and community and stuff. Certain things I have to do. So I have a set template of maybe 12 to 13 pictures, and then I get maybe 5 minutes to shoot stuff that I want to do for myself, and then the designers who work on the graphic that goes out will have an idea about how they want stuff shot, but I'll have my own idea as well. But generally, when we shoot a player now for a signing, it's all 3 kits, it's celebrations, it's high fives, it's handshakes to go in the shot for retail, and it's your standard head and shoulders pictures. But that my stuff is quite simple, hasn't changed too much. But obviously the video guys, it's massively changed, because I think every club tries to outdo every other club on their announcement. I mean, thankfully I've not had to see a grand piano be wheeled into the training ground for someone to play on for an announcement.
So I was going to say, in about 10 years with the next TV contract, we're going to be seeing £72 million spent in installments on the transfer announcements, not on the transfer. It's going to be the war, the battle for the best announcement ever. But you've just named the worst one ever. I mean
oh my God, that worked out well for them.
I used to play the piano, and after I saw that, I threw my piano out.
Right.
So Hickman,
but they're great. The transfer deadline days.
Oh, go ahead, Sue.
Sorry. The transfer deadline day is a great day. The transfer deadline day is a great day if you sign players. I've spent plenty of years sitting in reception at London Colney for 10 hours and to be told you're not needed. But obviously in the last couple of years it's been quite exciting, and the last and this one was great. We had so many things going on, and players coming in, and and for me it's always great to meet new players as well. It's I really like it's a shame to see some of the old guys go, but it's great to see new people come in and fresh faces, and and we've got a really good group who've come in this last transfer window. Really, really impressive and good people to deal with from my perspective.
Yeah, it is a wonderful time when things happen, and just underwhelming when they don't.
So we're gonna try and get all the questions asked in the chat box to the end of the pod. But I want to ask this one because it kind of discusses what we're talking about now. Hickman asks, do you have a studio on site, or do you have to transform a conference room? Like, he just wonders about your setup, pre-lighting, things of that nature.
We have a massive building next to the main training complex, which the youth team use, and in that we have a 3D room which they film the guys, and sort of virtual reality room. So I use that when it's empty, but we light everything sort of the same way. You know, it's a great area to work in. You know, I've shot player signings everywhere, and you try and make the light sort of constant. But we're very lucky with the space that we've got, so we don't have a studio.
We have a question that pretty much been asked and answered, but I wanted to read it because I love this guy. He is a talented man for whom creating logos and artwork is what he does best, and he goes by the name of Lacazette. He actually does. That's his Twitter handle. And he's in the chat with us right now. He, by the way, donated his time to design the logo that the user of the podcast may have seen for Gooners versus Cancer. And I really have not done a great job of publicizing him for that, which I apologize. But he says, do you ever know about Arsenal's transfer business before the public? Before the public, I would imagine. But like you've just said, not necessarily a week or two. You don't know about the players that they're working on getting necessarily. No. It's more about what's done.
And you know what? I'm a fan. I don't want to be disappointed if it doesn't happen. So I'd rather not know. I'd rather, when they say to me it's happening tomorrow, I'd rather be that rather than we're signing Lionel Messi. Oh no, we're not. Okay, so I'd rather.
You should just you could just release pictures of Messi from some photo shoot and
tempted.
You would break the internet.
I know. I'm very tempted to do it sometime.
And speaking of transfers out. I've seen comments recently on Twitter that would lead me to believe that maybe it's not too easy to avoid getting attached to these Arsenal boys. And do you keep in touch with the guys after they leave? Is it hard, like a breakup? And whose departure could you say had kind of hit you the hardest personally?
Maybe Liam Brady. Maybe that hit me. That probably hit me quite hard. Tony Adams retiring hit me hard, and Thierry as well, and Patrick, and blah. I could go on.
So everybody, basically, these are like your brothers.
Yeah, well, yeah. You get very attached, and you spend a lot of time with them, and with them as well. Arsenal's a very special football club, and when players leave, and then they come back, you can see how much Arsenal means to them. It's not just an average football club. Every ex-player who comes back, who I see, will always talk with fondness about their time here. They might, whatever reasons they leave for, I don't know one who hasn't ever said to me that they love their time at Arsenal. So it's difficult to say goodbye, but the good thing now is you keep in touch on social media or on Instagram, and a lot of the guys I keep in touch with now, the ones I want to. So they got, for me, gone but not forgotten.
Yeah, and when they're here, do you have an opportunity to? I mean, is it business only, or do you fraternize with the fellas outside of official team duties and shoots and stuff?
No, not really. Look, it's business. Look, when I first started, I was the same age as these guys' parents, and now I'm. They were old enough to be my parents, but now, I'm old enough to be their parents. They're a different generation to me. I'm Jack Wilshere's dad, and we share the same birthday. So not really. I socialise with my son who's 20. I'm not going to socialise with a professional footballer who drives a £250,000 Lamborghini when I drive a little Citroen.
So you haven't been a passenger of Aubameyang's then? I see.
No. But we winning the cup final, we have a party at the end of it, so we sort of socialise there. But I mean, I've been out for a few beers with ex-players, obviously from the sort of well-known drinkers from the past, but
Captain Campbell.
yeah, but that's all changed now, hasn't it? The players don't really drink now anyway.
No, not well. They don't let you see them drink. That unless you're Jamie Vardy or something like that. Enough with transfers. Actually, quick break. If you can humor me for a second, Andy. I know that you've been very patient with me over this, but we're in the
huge numbers.
Final week of Gooners versus Cancer. Stu, this is a charitable effort that Andy and I started a few years ago. It's tied into raising money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And as I've been saying, I've just been blown away by, thanks to the summer tour, we've been able to raise money in the cities that we had the summer tour. We've had auctions and raffles and general fundraising. And the one part of it that is still left in the last 10 days of the effort is the auction. So far, overall, we have raised now $13,000 for Gooners versus Cancer. Our goal, which was originally 10, is now bumped up to 15. And the thing that's going on now, it's so criminally underviewed. And I just want to see, we got to get some eyes on this because we got 10 days left. We've got about 17 items on here that are fantastic. Games to any Arsenal game of your choice, amazing tickets. Club level front row given by Jack Stevenson. We've got a clock watch from Gav from She War that is one of the last clock watches that are being made. 4 tickets to a legend tour led by an Arsenal legend. Maybe it'll even be Stu that leads that. Tickets for 4. We've got clock canvases of Highbury that are available. Piebury Corner has donated a dinner for 4 on game day up to £100, and right now you can bid on it for $80, which is far less than £100. Got some stunts by friends of ours like Gunner Blog and Lee Judges. Signed copies of Amy Lawrence. There's 2 of those left. Not signed copy of Amy Lawrence, mind you. A signed copy of Amy Lawrence's book. Which has a forward by Thierry Henry, and then 2 tickets to any Europa League game. Right now, most of these things are available for less than what they would cost for just buying them from the vendor that sells them. Yet this gives you an opportunity to get a great experience for a great price and donate to a great cause. So thank you again to everybody that's donated so far. And if we can get some eyes on that auction in the next 10 days or so, that would be great because I can see that giving us a great finish. So thanks for letting me take a few minutes of the pod for that. Shout out to the chat. We've got some great interaction going on here. John from Miami's in here. Danny, Fredo, seeing a lot of names I'm not used to seeing. David Price has joined us, which we appreciate.
Oh, dear. Put your kids to bed, Pricey.
he said he doesn't play footy.
Yeah, he was in the car. I think he was getting away from his kids at the time. But we've got Elroy. Chris Davison has got a question that we're going to be answering in a few minutes. Becca, Arjun, I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned you, but keep up the interaction. We're going to be answering your questions starting now. So if you've got any, please put them into the chat so that our friend B can put those into the room for us. Lots of questions from Arsenal America members. You are beloved here in Arsenal by the great Arsenal America fan club. And let's start off, Andy, with
So from Steven Hernandez, who is in Houston, Texas, he asked 4 questions. We're going to read 2. What is one of your favorite moments you've captured on film specific to a man we love, Arsene Wenger?
Probably, Pricey won't like me because he's in the background of the picture. When we won the league at White Hart Lane for the second time, after all the celebrations, Arsene turned and walked towards the tunnel with all the Arsenal fans behind him, and he just threw his arms up in the air. And on the background, the fans were holding an Arsene nose flag, and it was directly between his arms. It was a very lucky picture. But that's probably one of my favourites because it was lucky because of where his arms were positioned and the flag was right behind him. But also it was just such a great moment, such a great day. And then Pricey was in the background not taking a picture, which is hilarious, really. And he he's still a bit embarrassed about it today.
Got lost in the moment, I guess.
Yeah, we listen. We all did, really. We all did.
Well, and I think you had a question though about that exact topic about getting lost in the moment.
Yeah, and this is actually a great question. Maybe we can go specifically that Fredo asked as well, and I was kind of curious too. But specifically, like those most recent FA Cups with that drought, how, as a photographer, are you not caught in that moment of Ramsey scoring where you're like, you know, your heart is I gotta celebrate, but your head saying, hey, I need to snap these photos. Like, how do you keep grounded in those moments and just capture
like we did in the press box? You mean, Andy? No cheering in the press box. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's easy because I couldn't be a fan. You know, I went to Dallas a few years ago for the Dallas Cup with the youth team and watched Tottenham Arsenal on the TV in the bar with Steve Bold and Neil Banfield. And I had to go to my room at halftime. I was so nervous. So, you know, when I've got a camera in my hand, I can concentrate. I don't think about the game so much. But if I was a fan, I don't know how fans do it. I mean, I would be the worst possible fan. I wouldn't watch the game. I would get so drunk before, get banned, get thrown out of the stadium. So it's you know, in a way, you sort of celebrate in your head, but you know you've got to do your job. But I don't think I could watch football any other way now. Certainly not Arsenal.
So it's almost like your regulator. The fact that the camera forces you to kind of be a little bit more level-headed and not have blood pressure that goes through the roof.
Yeah, and look, when we beat Spurs in the semi-final at Wembley in '93. I jumped back off my chair and was celebrating, lying on the ground, and I looked up, and all the photographers were looking at me as though I was some sort of moron. And then I realised, shit, I've missed a half decent picture here. So you sort of learn by your mistakes. So and I think you have to be, ultimately you're there to capture what happens on the pitch. Yes, you're a fan. Yes, and you can celebrate afterwards. We win a great game at Emirates. Pricey and I go back into the office, we start working, we have a couple of beers and we talk through the game and our pictures and stuff. And, the reward is we win a great game and we get some great pictures out of it.
Yeah. And Stephen Hernandez would like to ask what your top cameras are to shoot with.
So we shoot on Canon, on Nikon. Oh my God. We shoot on Nikons now.
There goes your sponsorship.
Yeah. So I've always used Nikons, and then we changed to Canon about sort of 8 or 10 years ago, and then Nikon approached me to go back to Nikon, and they did us a really great deal. But the cameras are unbelievable. From what I first started with, my first camera was a little Kodak Instamatic camera, so they've moved on a lot, but they're so expensive to buy. Luckily the club pay for all our equipment now.
So it's not just clothing manufacturers that Americans pronounce completely different than everywhere else in the world. It's also cameras, because we call it Nikon. Yeah, Nikon, Nike, Adidas. I mean, it's so
Puma when it's Puma.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not Kodak, the correct word for the other one. But excellent. I know we've got some gear and photo hounds in here who wanted to know that. So Chris Davidson, also in the chat, tweeted us with a question: which Arsenal game, and if this has been answered through one of your other answers, let us know, but which Arsenal game has been the most memorable to photograph and why?
That's really tough. I mean, there's probably a few. They're generally linked to.
I can tell you which games they weren't.
Well, yeah, I know. But winning the game we won the league at Old Trafford was amazing, and linked to, I got some great shots as well, and then I managed to run down the middle of the pitch with the team after the game as well, which is really great. A security guard swung a boot at me as I ran down the tunnel. But that winning the league at White Hart Lane, we got some great shots from that. But they're generally sort of, they're linked to performances, really. They're not linked to specific pictures, because ultimately you can take not the greatest picture, but if moment, people will remember that more than a really top quality still image.
Well, that picture of Michael Thomas in Anfield '89 getting ready to put it past Bruce Grobbelaar, I don't have the tactical photographic experience to know whether it was a high quality picture or a high quality moment or both. I do have a framed photo of it up in my office room, but that's exactly what you're talking about. Whether it's a good picture or not, it is a unique picture of an amazing moment.
It's all about moments, and which is a bit difficult because not always the best moments are the best pictures.
Yeah,
but we've done it between myself and David. We've done okay to get some of the best pictures from some of the best moments in the last sort of 15, 16 years.
And there have been many of them.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, Danny, the GFP from our friends over at the Burkamp Wonderland, has wondered, have you ever gone back and checked your hard drive or external hard drives to see how many photos you have stored or, keep on the hard drive for so many years?
And we've got cloud.
Do we use cloud? Not for our still images, because some of them are players that we've signed that we haven't announced, so we keep everything to ourselves. So we have over 1 million pictures in our archive, which I'm very proud of, because one of the main reasons that they brought me in was to create an Arsenal archive. So we've got 1 million, maybe it might even be close to 1.5 million. So I go back and do a number count, and then occasionally I might go back and look for a date back in time for something, like a famous game, or I do, when I've got a bit of downtime, I flick through some old games and have a look and see, if my photography's improved in the last 20 years.
And then Danny also would like to know, a little bit off topic, is there any truth to the rumor that you're a big fan of RC Lens?
I wrote that question. The question was, what is your favorite French football club? Any truth to the rumor that it's RC Lens?
RC Lens, right. No,
I didn't get it until I just read it, and then I thought, God damn it, okay. That was stupid of me to read.
That's what happens when you don't take a look at the pictures. Like
it might annoy people, but it's Bordeaux at the moment.
It doesn't bother me. It's it
bothers people about Lauren Koscielny going there, but
if you were in your professional career that span, would you have said to him, hey, maybe the shirt pulling off wasn't the best idea? Or would you just have said, hey, this is higher up, so I'm just gonna take the photos and watch behind the camera?
I know people were offended. People were offended by it, but it didn't offend me at all. It didn't bother me whatsoever. I've known the guy for 7-8 years. He's a great guy. I know his wife very well. She's lovely. I know his kids. They're a great family, great people. The sort of abuse that he got just really annoyed me. And he's one player that I'll always keep in contact with. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I feel like as Arsenal supporters, and you probably see it more than most, they always need to have something to bitch and moan about, and it's unfortunate, but
Well, and because you just mentioned it, Nilesh asked a question which we were going to answer later, which is, how do you deal with trolls online who would abuse players that are pictured in things you upload?
As I said earlier, I don't read too much, but if I flick through occasionally and see some of the stuff, that's a couple of bits that have been written about some of our younger players who are, sort of just starting their careers, I just find that a little bit distasteful. And these guys, there's not one player that I've ever worked with who's never wanted to do their best for Arsenal. Okay, they might make mistakes during a game or whatever, but to some of the abuse I see it's a bit OTT, but then that's social media, isn't it? That really is, and I feel I'm in I feel I'm in quite a good position to try and protect the players or try and stand up for them, and I know I always will. I mean, I think that's I don't do it out of duty. I'll do it out of, I think, sort of decency, really.
Do you, because you're around the squad pretty much every day, I assumed, do you feel like that type of negativity spews into the locker room, or are they pretty sheltered from it being professionals, or do you see it? I mean, Mustafi most recently, it just seems like, and Xhaka, there just seems to be so much unnecessary hatred to a player. Do you see it affect the locker room, or is it just kind of off, their back?
I couldn't say really, to be honest, because I spend a lot of time in and around the training ground, but don't really have conversations with the players about what's been said on social media. So I'm sure look, they're only human. I'm sure we're all the same. If someone criticizes, I see what someone abusing me on social media, and I think, well, I can either block you or I can get myself sacked replying to you. So or I can say to you, why don't you come down to Emirates and we can sort this out?
Yeah, that might result in a sacking as well, I think.
Well, but 98% of the people won't show up.
Yeah. But I'm sure it affects them. But I mean, these guys are mentally so strong anyway. When they get out on the football pitch, they're so focused. So, some troll who's doesn't know anything about football, just abusing them or whatever. I mean, I think they probably listen to the other players and the coaching staff rather than some little oik on social media.
From Rizwan Pira in Atlanta, Georgia, which do you enjoy more, taking photos of training sessions or games?
Games, definitely. Only if we win.
So you feel the pressure retrospectively in hindsight, whether we win or lose. But I mean, one's obviously you don't get the chance to recreate moments, whereas in training, I would imagine there are more kind of common stock situations of taking photos of. But I mean, tell us whether there's a big distinction.
There's the emotional feeling of a game. There's nothing you can compare it to. And training sessions are great, but they're obviously not as intense as games, and they're not as key. And you can miss pictures in training sessions that aren't that important. So you're not really on edge. But during games, the highs and lows of shooting a game of football, I'm sure every photographer would say the same. If you sit in a spot, you hope to get everything. You hope everything comes your way. If it doesn't, you're angry. I get to the end of a game, at 90 minutes of football, and I've never ever felt I've done the perfect job, because you can never capture everything. Training sessions are the same sort of stuff all the time, so you get a decent set of pictures out of it. It's it's good, but matches are the most important. That's your bread and butter stuff, really.
Great. Having unprecedented access to the team, and based on what you've seen, and again, this goes to kind of whether you see the psyche of the players and how much things affect them, but also to their togetherness and the solidity. Compared to previous seasons, for instance, are you seeing differences in the personality or the intensity or togetherness of this club that might give you a feeling on what we can expect to see on the pitch this season?
Well, I'm excited about the players we've signed, and they still haven't really been together that long. You look at transfer deadline was however long, 3 weeks ago. So I think we'll see what happens in the sort of coming months. But for me as a fan, it's you just see Danny Ceballos and you see Pepe, and those are players you want to see get on the ball and play, and Joe Willock and players like that. For me, it's really exciting. And I was chatting to my eldest son yesterday, who's 20, and he's really buzzing for the season. He's really excited about what we can achieve. And I always sort of gauge he for me is just sort of is your 20-year-old Arsenal fan, and he's really excited about what could happen. I see it from a slightly different perspective, but I think I'm looking forward to this season. I think it could be a really good season for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 2 questions from Mike Hernandez, who's one of the first listeners to our pod, and they're both a little bit controversial. So if you want to sidestep them,
no comment.
So he asks, the first one is, which player would you be more welcoming back to Arsenal for a Legends game? Van Persie, Cole, Nasri, or Fabregas?
Van Persie. Well, Ash. All but one. Can I just say that?
All but one? Sure.
But
no,
listen, it really is hard. I mean, there are two that I got identified. I'm pretty sure you'd take Ashley and Cesc back, but between the other two, that's a hard one.
I'd take Ashley and Cesc back, yeah.
I'd take them both back. And I saw Robin recently, and we had a good chat. And I've got no issues with Robin or Ash or Cesc, and I know all of them still love their time at Arsenal. I know it's a bit controversial, but
it is.
Time heals over time. So I've got no issues with three of them.
I absolutely have no issues with Cesc whatsoever, because I feel like he, Stu, you've been around this club for so long. I mean, he's a childhood supporter growing up in Barcelona. Like, how could you not say, yeah, I want to go home and play? I mean,
yeah, it
just sucks that we couldn't re-sign him and he went to Chelsea. I mean, he would have come back and probably left the club a legend had we had that opportunity to re-sign him. But, it is what it is.
I won't relitigate that whole thing, but I will say, because I know that you won't and you can't and you don't want to, but omission is sometimes the strongest statement of all. And and I absolutely don't know a single person on this earth who has anything nice to say about someone that only got mentioned during the asking of the question and not in the answer. So totally. I think I'll leave it there.
The other question from Mike was, and you kind of alluded to your thoughts, I think, with the piano statement, but was there really tension between Alexis and the rest of the players? Was that just media hype?
I couldn't see it. On my dealings with him, he was great, very easy to deal with. I don't see stuff that goes on in the locker room itself. I see them out on the training pitches, but for me, Alexis was just a guy who just wanted to play football. All he wanted to do was play football, and it didn't happen. He was brilliant for us, but he went to Man United, and unfortunately for him, it hasn't worked out. But I honestly couldn't see any tension between. But I'm not in a situation where I'd see that. I'm not behind closed doors like that. But he was a great player for us when he was there. He did a lot. He did a lot for the football club.
Yeah, I mean, he was excitement that we hadn't seen in a long, long time while he was playing at the top of his game. I'm going to do us a favor and skip this one because Mr. DJ, I wanted to at least give him a shout out. He said, what are your top 10 pictures you've taken at Arsenal? Now, we know how hard it is to answer what the top one is. So if you'll come on with us again sometime soon, we're going to have a special 5-hour special podcast called Who takes us through his top 397 pictures of all time. And that'll be great. But we got a couple more questions that were tweeted to us, and then for maybe 3 or 4 more minutes, there are some questions in the podcast today, which Andy, I'm going to need you to read because
that's fine.
I lost them.
So Ben in Grays, England, asks: in all your years at the club, which teenager excites you the most?
Well, Cesc. It was always Cesc. Just unbelievable. And then after Cesc, it was Jack Wilshere. And then I don't want it to go to his head, but probably Joe Willock now.
Yeah,
I was going to say Joe seems like just a class above the typical. What is he? 19 years old?
Yeah,
and
I think him and Eddie are both featuring for the under 21s today.
Well, Reese certainly has been.
Oh no, sorry, it was Reese and Eddie.
I think Joe. I think Joe's got a slight. I think he has a slight injury. So
yeah.
But Cesc was absolutely incredible, and then Jack as well, just unbelievable footballers.
Now, is it? I mean, again, the footballing capability is clear and it's obvious, and you see, being in training, you see it more than most. But is there a mental aspect where you can say, at 16, 17, this kid gets it. At this other kid, I can see doesn't have the mentality. And I'm going to use a specific example of someone who. I watched him play one U21 game for Arsenal, and he grew up within 20 minutes of where I live. Gideon Zelalem. I watched him play, and the young man had so much talent, but just the look on his face looked as though he was out of his depth internationally, just wasn't comfortable. And I didn't see a confident young man who was going to grow into that position. In that game, my head was turned by somebody else whose name was Alex Iwobi. So, I mean, was it something about Cesc, something about Joe or Jack beyond their physical capabilities and footballing capabilities that strikes you when you see them in training? Is it a mentality thing?
I just think they play with no. I think they play with no fear. You know, I think that's the whole thing. I think a lot of young players can go and play on the big stage and get really sort of shocked by it and not be able to perform. But Cesc, Jack, and Joe are quite similar in that it's not that they haven't got any respect, but they play with absolutely no fear. They play their own game all the time, and they know they deserve to play on the big stage. And I think that's a big difference. And it's such a shame for there's been some great young players who've not made it at Arsenal, and maybe part of it is that they're a little bit starstruck, or they're feel maybe they're not good enough to play. But those three certainly are in that sort of category of knowing that they're good enough to play at that level.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Questions from the chat?
Yeah, so Elroy asked the question, what's the most secretive transfer you've been a part of?
This is easy. Sol Campbell.
Oh, I have a good one.
Oh, tell us about that.
Yeah, can you walk us through kind of that?
Well, I only knew when I arrived at the training ground that day. So all the way, my responsibilities used to be to, on the morning of a transfer, they'd phone me and they'd say, right, we're signing someone today. Can you let the other press photographers know? And since then, we don't let anyone else in. We just do it ourselves. But we used to have an open sort of media day for it. So I was phoning all the, obviously hands-free as I was driving to the training ground. I was phoning all the newspaper photographers and saying, we've got a signing, blah, 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 at 2 o'clock or whatever time it was.
All those hands-free telephones and back in the day.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And holding a coffee and driving with two elbows on the steering wheel. And they're all like, no, we're not coming. We can't be bothered. We know it's Richard Wright. Virtually everyone was saying that. And I got to the training ground and I didn't know. And I pulled into the training ground and Sean O'Connor, who's the training ground manager, was at the gates. And I thought, it's a bit strange. He's not normally there. And I put my window down and he said, it's Sol Campbell. And that was it. And I was like, my God, I can't believe it. And I walked into the training ground, walked into the outside Arsene Wenger's office, and Sol came out, walked out of the office with Arsene, and I just started laughing. And Sol Campbell just looked at me as I was some sort of madman. It was just the weirdest feeling ever. And then obviously everyone thought it was another player. So we had an open press conference, and we walked up the back stairs to the press conference room, and all the door opened, all the journalists, it was half empty, there's hardly anyone there. They're all sitting there playing on their phones and looking at their laptops. Sol walked in and they looked up and they were immediately all got on their phones. Fuck, it's Sol Campbell, it's Sol Campbell. And they couldn't, and I just thought that it was the most perfect, and obviously signing him from Spurs as well, which was amazing. But it was one of those things that will probably never ever happen again. But it was so fun to be a part of it.
Well,
great question.
Credit to B, because he used that photo in the little announcement video we made for you. So that was good.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Danny, the GFP again from our friends over at the Burkamp Wonderland, was wondering, what is Ken, the bloke who used to organize the photographers at Highbury, up to now? Does that ring a bell?
Who knows? I don't know. Yeah, I remember him. Yeah, I don't.
Danny used to sit amongst the photographers.
Right. Okay. Well, one of his sons still works in our call centre at Arsenal, but his other son Stephen worked with Ken. But I think he did 1 year at Emirates, so I've not seen him. He was a decent age when he retired from working with us.
Great. And then Arsenal might.
That's what my friends tell me.
This is I like this question. Our friends down Arsenal Miami asked, which player has made you retake their photos the most?
Oh, you know what? He'll get upset. He'll get upset. I'm not saying it.
Can we do like we did with Nasri, where you name everybody but that player?
No, I can't do it.
No, we're not here for the exclusive.
I'm gonna take a guess, and I just think because he is
not if he's correct.
Yeah. You could nod if I'm correct, since
we don't have.
No, it's not. It's not someone who's here now, but
okay.
No, but he's a really great guy. But yeah, had to do his head and shoulders picture at the start of the season a few times. But we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Jens Lehmann, I'm going with that.
You know who it's not, Mike? Xhaka, because his face is so perfect. And you know how much I love that man.
You can't catch him in a bad light unless you're taking a picture of him staring at a guy who's picking his phone up off the table.
Well, there's a picture of me and him together where he looks great and I look like I'm just, I was about to faint. But Stu, you had one thing that we kind of mentioned before is you took on the horse, I think, a couple of years ago. There's a lot of in the knows in the social media world. You kind of made it clear that you typically find out about these signings a few days in advance, either by design or your own personal kind of want. But are there actual people outside of a group of maybe 3 or 4 who actually know what's going to be happening at the club? I mean, there's so many in the knows on Twitter. Do you think this information gets leaked, or from your perspective, being so close to the club, it's held under lock and key, I'm guessing?
I think it's changed in the last few years. There's obviously stuff gets out. There's a lot more than 3 or 4 people who know about transfers. I couldn't say if someone is telling someone what's going on. It's a lot. Obviously, the stuff with the horse, he just agitated me because he abused me. So I thought, well, I'm going to make you look stupid, which he basically did, made himself look stupid anyway. But generally, I wouldn't, go after someone like that. But if they're going to abuse me, then, what was it he say? You're just a photographer. What would you know? And I'm like, well, I think I probably should know.
Yeah, I think he tracked your whereabouts at that moment too. And it's
he hacked into your phone and
yeah. One of the classics was which was on deadline day, however many years ago. I was standing in Ken Fryer's office, who's obviously the greatest Arsenal man living, watching Sky TV, standing next to Andre Arshavin, and then watching Sky TV as the guy from Sky TV was on the roundabout outside Emirates saying, Andre Arshavin has now left the stadium. He's flying to the airport because his transfer has been.
You're looking at the guy.
Looked at Andre and thought, I'm sure this is Andre Arshavin next to me, but he's not. He's obviously not. So not everyone gets everything correct. There's people who know what's going on, and people who don't, and people who say they do who don't. But I try not to pay too much attention to them.
We pay a lot of attention, and then set up fake Twitter accounts to battle them and mock them, and then and then both of us just get sacked from our jobs because we're never working anymore.
I think we got to all the questions, Mike, and we thank everyone who dialed it in. Stu, I will ask one question from me personally. Do you follow any American sports, and are you a supporter of any American sports teams that you try and follow on the regular?
Not really. I mean, we used to go to Mexico quite a bit on holidays, so we watch a lot of American football but not really. I mean, I know there's a couple of Arsenal fans playing football out in the States, but I'm a lot like a lot of American fans who you would know. You say, do you like soccer? And they say, yeah, but what teams do you like? And they don't know. I mean, I watch a lot of American sport, but I can't say, my heart's with Arsenal. It's the only team I really follow.
Well, nothing wrong with not being into American sports. We got a bunch of silly ones over them. It's not like cricket. And what happened to Ben Stokes? Did he catch the Tottenham curse there a little bit? Man's been magical all summer. Yeah. Comes out as a Tottenham supporter and gets hurt. Is that true?
Well, I don't know. Cricket's not my loads of guys running around hitting a red ball with a with a stick. It's not really my sport, I'm afraid.
That's true. Just football. We're just football men. What can I say, man? You said it all. I know I speak on behalf of B, who's in the background, of A, our podcast users who I call PU. When I say thank you for joining us, it's been a thrill. We met you over the summer. It was a thrill. I think I ran into you maybe somewhere between 3 and 150 times outside the stadium in LA, taking shots of people walking into the stadium and in the back rooms and stuff. And it just, you told us you'd come on the podcast. You're a man of your word. And I hope it's been as enjoyable or half as enjoyable for you as it's been for us. Anything you'd like to promote, or where can we find you on social media? Where should people not troll you from? Unless they want to get their ass handed to them on a plate.
Well, look, no, thanks so much for asking me. It's been really good, and we had such a great tour as well. It's always great to go to the States, and it's great to tour anyway, just to see. I think for the fans and for the staff of the football club to actually go and see how big Arsenal is all over the world is brilliant for us. We had a brilliant couple of weeks in the States, and hopefully we'll be back soon. It was great to meet you guys as well. We had some good days and some good nights, and some. It's a great country for us to come and visit.
Well, it was an amazing experience for everybody, and Arsenal America supporters who flocked together in all of those cities just haven't stopped talking about it yet. Just a quick announcement for anybody who's still got more podcast in them for this evening. Coming up at 8:30, in just a half an hour, make sure to head over to the Same Old Arsenal podcast with Craig. I'll be taking Lee's place tonight. Just less bald, only a little bit less bald, and their crew. They're doing a joint podcast with Guns and Yellow Ribbons, but I'll be heading over there as they have been kind enough to let me kind of talk up the auction on their airwaves. So if they're dumb enough to let me talk about Arsenal, I might do some of that as well. But Stu, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking.
We'll be back next week after the Watford game with another great guest, and that's about it. So keep up the great work. We'll be watching and looking for your photos. Andy, I'll be looking at different modeling agencies for you and your family.
Thank you.
And that's it. Come on, you Gooners.
Thank you. Goodbye.